Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Matthew and today we're doing another figure review. Today we're doing a figure review of the MonsterArts Godzilla Ultima from the anime Godzilla Singular Point on Netflix. And I honestly have to say, this is something I'm actually kind of excited for. Originally, I saw this guy at a convention like back in, I believe, the summer of 2022, and I was tempted to pick it up because I had a well-paying job at the time. But when I initially saw the price tag, I was like, you know what? No, I'm gonna skip out on that. And plus, I wasn't really a big fan of MonsterArts to begin with because I'm just not a big fan of how they engineer the figures, being a lot more interior and like working the joints outside versus NECA, where it's relatively solid and they allow you to like change the joints and there's no gaps really where you can see through the figure. That I liked more about NECA. That's why I've always stuck around with it, and because of the cheaper price tag. But seeing as how that this was essentially the only, at the time, the only 6-inch Ultima figure, it kind of got my attention, but I never really considered grabbing it. That wasn't until recently where I managed to find a fairly cheap price for this thing, and I decided to snag it up along with a few other Godzilla stuff. And, well, here I am, reviewing my now technically third and fourth, because there was another one in the set that you'll find later. But how does my third Godzilla himself, MonsterArts figure, fare? Let's go ahead and find out. Starting off with the sculpt and paint, I have to give it to MonsterArts for actually replicating the show's design at least pretty well. I honestly like the very colorful, well, not very colorful, actually, no, definitely colorful, eyes that they chose. I think it was like this in the film. I get to the show. Again, it's been like years since I watched the show back when it first released. I just kind of watched it and never touched it again. I watched episode 1 recently, but I just couldn't get back into it. But the eye paint is certainly there, and I like the orange pupil and then the yellow iris and then the solid black eyes. I definitely like the nice kind of gray mohawk for the spines. Then we can kind of go down to like the spines of like the neck and the chin, and it honestly, or the, I guess the neck, and then it kind of goes down to the chest, which it honestly looks really good. Teeth are also individually sculpted, but not individually painted, but it is done well enough to the point where it does get the job done. And I also have to give them props for the inside of the mouth. As you can see, the inside of the mouth is just, what is this? Well, I'll tell you what this is. Chaos. That's literally the only thing I can think of it. Chaos. I will say that it does look a little weird with it being like kind of slacked a little bit, because like the teeth don't really line up like 100%. But you can kind of see like the multiple rows of teeth. Like there's like the main line, and then there's 2, 3, 4, like the fourth one being in the middle, and then you have the top row, which there's like 2 more up on the top. And there's this big gaping open hole in his throat, even though it's not like this in the figure. And then we have like the sides and the membrane, and then like these big canines. Like if you get bitten by Ultima Godzilla, you are absolutely finished. However, something that I'm not necessarily a fan of are the way his eyes are painted. They opted to go for a much more straight ahead look, but like it just looks so off having this eye being much more circular than this one, because this one's shaped more like an oval, and because of that, it just looks more like he got hit on the head with a hammer, and gives it more of a goofy Looney Tunes like appearance instead of a being that can control 13 different dimensions at will. Yes, you heard me say that. He can do that in the show. Moving on down to the chest, and I gotta say again, it has some of the nice detailing that you find on the rest of the body, featuring the spikes you see on the chest area, and of course we have a bit of line spikes on the forearms, which I guess that seems to be a recurring kind of like thing going on with Godzilla lately, with Godzilla having like spikes on his forearm or elbows, because it was first this, then it was -1 Godzilla, and now it's Godzilla Evolved. I wonder if the next Godzilla is going to have like these big jagged elbow spikes. But anyways, back to the figure. The claw paint is actually pretty well done. It's just kind of basically applied. There's no like color shading, but it does the job fine enough to the point where it gets, well, the job done. But honestly, I kind of would have liked to see a bit more color variety. Maybe they were going for accuracy for the show because it was basically colored, but at the same time, I would have liked to see maybe some more darker highlights to what is essentially a much more realistic figure because this is something you can hold in your hand. But again, maybe it's because of the source material, but let's be honest, MonsterArts is kind of back and forth on movie accuracy. I'm looking at you, 2000. And moving on down to these big, meaty legs. Like, look at how big this dude's thighs are. Like, those are bigger than Shin. Which is ironic because look at his shin. This Godzilla has got some pretty well painted claws. Again, not much in the way of painting, but again, it's got some nice bone yellow, white, kind of like eggshell white coloring going on. I know the glare on the light looks a little harsh, but it does look really good in person. Got like the back bent toe a little bit that kind of juts out, almost making it look like a bird leg. And I know some dinosaurs had that too, but it looks really good and like has all these different scales and all these different textures, and it does look really good. But again, I kind of wish it had a little bit more color variety. Next up, we're going to take a look at the dorsal plates, and I have to say, these are probably the most unique I've seen on a Godzilla design ever. We have these dorsal fins, which are like vein shaped, almost looking like leaves. And we have like these fins, which kind of resemble the 54 fins, because like we have this fin, and we have this fin, and it almost looks exactly like the 54 fins. And I really wouldn't be surprised if that was the inspiration for it. But what's actually pretty cool about these fins, design-wise at least, is that usually they come in rows. Here, they're just more like scattered. See, these ones don't align. Maybe the ones in the middle kind of align, but it's not like... Actually, no, the middle ones don't align whatsoever. But as you can see, there's so much like compacted detail, and like the veins are just painted so excellently. And even though it's got like some red and gray for the base, I think it looks really good. And lastly, we have the tail. And I have to be 100% honest, this has to be the most simplistic yet chaotic tail I've seen on a Godzilla figure ever. Not just like in a line, ever. Because we have a bit of like an abrupt stop right here from the more veiny spikes moving on down to the back, and then you kind of get to here where they stop, and then they kind of go to like this simplistic gray option, which I can't imagine the paint, the amount of money would be going to just to paint these veins, especially like on an action figure like this. I know it's probably like this in the show, but And then going on up, we get long tail. This tail is so long, like it is so hefty too. There's really not much also in like the sculpt and paint department aside from just like smaller and smaller segments, but it does get the job done as far as like the gray application itself is concerned, and it honestly looks pretty sweet if I'm going to be 100% honest, because again, the nature of this tail, and especially like in the body, it just looks so good. So overall, for sculpt and paint, I have to say that this guy is definitely a plus in my book. I would have liked to seen a little bit more paint variety, but the sculpted details are really good, and I have to say the paint application for what's there is rather nice, aside from how they painted the eyes. Sides looks good, front on, no. It just looks kind of atrocious, if I'm going to be honest. But again, aside from that, and a little bit more paint variety, this thing is pretty much awesome.